He had 72 hours to save his daughter from sleeping on the street. Michael Carter had done everything right, worked double shifts, skipped meals, sold everything that wasn't nailed down, and still the numbers didn't add up. The eviction notice was taped to his door like a verdict. 6 years old. Lily was 6 years old, and he was about to watch her carry a backpack full of stuffed animals into a shelter. Then a woman in a wheelchair called his name and offered him a deal that would change everything. If this story moves you, hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The eviction notice had been on the door since Tuesday. Michael had peeled it off before Lily woke up that morning, folding it into quarters and sliding it into the back pocket of his jeans like a thing he could contain, like hiding it from his daughter somehow meant hiding it from the world. The tape left a pale rectangle on the painted wood of apartment 4C, ghost white against the scuffed beige. He stared at it for a moment after Lily's bus pulled away from the curb, that ghost rectangle, and then he went inside and sat at the kitchen table and did the math again. He'd been doing the math for 3 weeks. The math never changed. $11,240. That was the number. That was what stood between Michael Carter and the street, between his daughter and a cot in a city shelter, between his life as it currently was and some version of it that he could not let himself picture too clearly, because every time he did, his hands started shaking and he couldn't make them stop. He'd borrowed against his 401k 18 months ago when his ex-wife's medical bills started coming in. He hadn't told Lily's mother he'd done it, because by then they were already finished, really finished, the kind of finished where the lawyers do the talking. And there was no point. Dana had her own problems. Dana had a diagnosis and a prognosis and a timeline. And by the time the timeline ran out, there was nothing left but Lily and the debt and a stack of paperwork with Michael's name at the top of everything. He worked maintenance at the Howell Tower complex downtown. It was honest work. It paid a little above minimum, had okay benefits, and the supervisor, a heavy-set man named Gus who smelled permanently of cigarettes, mostly left Michael alone as long as the boilers ran and the tenants didn't complain. The job was fine. The job was what it was. It had never been the plan. The plan had been the business degree, the small contractor operation he'd almost gotten off the ground with his college roommate before the roommate got cold feet and pulled out. But the plan had dissolved back when the hospital bills started. And now the job was just the job. And it paid what it paid. And $11,000 was still $11,000. He'd called his brother in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. His brother had 3 kids and a mortgage, and the kind of measured sympathy that people produce when they genuinely cannot help you. "Man," his brother had said, "that's rough. I wish I could—" "Don't worry about it," Michael had said, because making his brother feel bad wouldn't pay the rent. He'd called his mother. His mother was 63 and living on Social Security and a part-time job at a grocery store in Dayton. She'd cried on the phone, which was worse than his brother's sympathy, and offered him $300, which he refused, because taking $300 from a woman who counted her prescriptions against her grocery budget wasn't something he could live with. He'd applied for 2 emergency assistance programs. One had a 6-week processing time. The other had a waiting list. He had 72 hours before the sheriff's office came to change the locks. The call came on a Wednesday morning while he was replacing a corroded pipe fitting in the basement of Howell Tower. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he almost didn't answer it because his hands were wet and he didn't recognize the number, a 212 area code, some Manhattan exchange, but something made him strip off his glove and pick up. "Is this Michael Carter?" A woman's voice, clear and precise, the kind of voice that was accustomed to being listened to. "Yeah, who's this?" "My name is Diane Marsh. I'm the executive assistant to Sophia Sterling, CEO of Sterling Group. Mrs. Sterling would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. Today, if possible." Michael stood in the dim basement with the pipe fitting in his hand and a slow drip coming from somewhere behind the wall, trying to figure out if this was a sales call or a wrong number or something worse. "Sterling Group," he said. "Yes." "The real estate company." "Among other holdings." "Ms. Sterling is aware this call may seem unusual. She asked me to assure you that it's a legitimate business inquiry and that your time will be compensated regardless of whether a meeting results in any agreement." He almost said no. Later, he would think about that. How close he came to just saying thanks but no thanks and going back to the pipe fitting, and how completely different his life would be right now if he had. "What time?" he said instead. The Sterling Group occupied the top 6 floors of a glass tower on 53rd Street. Michael had passed it 100 times on the crosstown bus and never paid it much attention. It was just another piece of the city's vertical furniture, gleaming and indifferent. Walking through the lobby that afternoon in his cleanest jacket, which still had a small grease stain on the left cuff that he'd tried to scrub out and only managed to fade, he felt the particular discomfort of someone who knows immediately that they are in the wrong room. The receptionist directed him to a private elevator. He rode it to the 48th floor where a woman in a gray suit met him. Diane Marsh, he assumed, though she didn't introduce herself, and walked him down a corridor with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a city that seemed to exist in a different dimension from the one he normally occupied. She knocked twice on a set of double doors, opened them, and stepped aside. "Ms. Sterling will see you now." He went in. The office was large and spare, not the kind of lavish executive space he'd half expected, with mahogany and oil paintings, but something quieter and more purposeful. Clean lines. A long desk with 2 monitors, stacks of documents arranged with precision, bookshelves that held actual books, not decorative ones. A view of the city that took up the entire east wall, floor to ceiling, sky and steel, and the grid of streets below. And in front of the desk, facing the window with her back to him, was a woman in a wheelchair. She turned when she heard him come in. Sophia Sterling was younger than he'd expected. He'd Googled her in the elevator, quickly, thumbs flying, and the photos he'd found were mostly corporate headshots and grainy conference images, which hadn't prepared him for the actual person. She was 30, maybe 31, with dark hair pulled back from a face that was sharp and still and entirely unreadable. The wheelchair was streamlined, clearly custom, with a matte black frame. She moved it with the practiced ease of someone who had made peace, or something resembling peace, with the thing a long time ago. She looked at him with dark eyes that were assessing without being unkind. "Mr. Carter, sit down, please." He sat in one of the 2 chairs positioned across from the desk. She wheeled forward to her position behind it, the motion smooth and unhurried. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she said. "Can I offer you anything? Water? Coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you." She nodded. She had a file folder on the desk in front of her, and she opened it without preamble and looked at something inside it, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I'm going to be direct with you," Sophia Sterling said. "I find that it saves time." "Go ahead." "I've had you researched. Background check, financial history, employment record, everything relevant. I apologize for the intrusion. I understand that's not a comfortable thing to hear. But the offer I'm about to make requires due diligence, and I don't apologize for doing it thoroughly. What I can tell you is that everything I found reflects well on you." Michael felt the back of his neck go warm. "What kind of offer?" She set the folder down and looked at him directly. "I need a husband," she said. "Legally, on paper, for a period of 1 year. In exchange for that, I will clear your current debt in full, provide you and your daughter with housing, and establish a trust for Lily's education and long-term care. At the end of the year, we file for an uncontested divorce, part on respectful terms, and you keep everything you were given. No strings, no further obligations." The room was very quiet. Outside the window, the city moved, tiny cars and the glint of sun off glass, soundless from here. "Why?" Michael said. It wasn't the question he'd meant to lead with, but it was the one that came out. Something crossed her face. Not discomfort exactly, more like the careful arrangement of a person deciding how much truth to give. "My brother is making a move on the company," she said. "Victor Sterling. He's been positioning for 2 years to challenge my fitness to serve as CEO, using my disability as the opening primarily, and then adding whatever else he can manufacture. He has a motion coming before the board in 8 months that would require a psychological and lifestyle assessment." Her voice was level, factual, like she was describing a problem with someone else's infrastructure. "Part of his argument is that I am isolated, personally and socially unstable. A CEO without personal relationships or family is, in his framing, a liability." She paused. "A married CEO with a family is not. And a divorced CEO," Michael said, "is still better positioned than an unmarried one. The point isn't permanence. The point is the year, the board vote, and the legal record. He looked at the file folder on her desk. He thought about the ghost rectangle of tape on his apartment door. He thought about Lily asleep last night with her stuffed triceratops under one arm, completely unaware that her world was about 72 hours from collapsing. "You picked me specifically," he said. "That's not random." "No? Why me?" She folded her hands on the desk, a deliberate gesture, he thought, the kind of thing people do when they're being careful. "You're a single father with a 6-year-old daughter," she said. "That's not incidental. The board, and the court, if it comes to that, will be more persuaded by a family than by a marriage. A child grounds the narrative. Additionally," she hesitated, just a fraction, "your profile suggested a person who is private, non-exploitative, and motivated by something other than money for its own sake. Those are qualities I require. I've spoken with people who know you, not just paper, people." "Who?" "Your supervisor. A woman named Rosalind Webb at the shelter where you volunteered for 2 years before your wife's illness. A neighbor in your building, Mrs. Park, on the 3rd floor. I didn't tell them why I was asking. I asked about character." He should have been angry, he supposed. There was something that was adjacent to anger moving through him. The discomfort of having been examined without knowing it, measured, assessed. But the anger didn't quite catch because underneath it was a more pressing reality. $11,000, 72 hours. Lily and her triceratops. "What are the rules?" he said. Sophia Sterling reached into the folder and produced a document. It was several pages long, dense with text. She slid it across the desk toward him. "Everything is in there? You'll want a lawyer to review it before you sign. I'd recommend that regardless of your decision. The key terms. We live under the same roof for the duration. Public appearances as needed. Dinners, events, enough for the record to be credible. You maintain your employment or find other work as you choose. Lily attends school, lives normally. We are civil to each other. We do not," she paused, "complicate the arrangement emotionally. At the end of the year, we dissolve it cleanly. Your debts are cleared within 48 hours of signing. The housing is immediate. And if I decide I want out early? The terms are clear on that. You keep proportional compensation based on duration. Nothing is clawed back. I'm not interested in punitive clauses." He picked up the document. He flipped through it, not reading it. He couldn't read it here like this, with his heart doing something strange and too fast in his chest. But he looked at the structure of it, the numbered sections and the subclauses, and it was real. That was the thing. It was a real document. This was a real conversation. "I need 24 hours, he said. "That's reasonable." He put the document back on the desk, then picked it back up again and folded it. "Can I ask you something that's not in there?" "You can ask." "Does it bother you that it's not real?" Sophia Sterling looked at him for a moment. There was something in her eyes that he couldn't quite name, something that had been closed up tight for a long time and was staying that way. "What I need is real," she said. "What you need is real. The arrangement is a mechanism. I found it more useful to focus on what's real." He nodded slowly. He put the folded document in the inside pocket of his jacket, against the grease stain on his cuff. "I'll call you by tomorrow morning," he said. Tick. He picked Lily up from school that afternoon, and they walked home the long way, past the park where the pigeons congregated under the big elm. Lily talked the whole way. She was working through something complicated about whether dinosaurs could have learned to talk if they'd had more time, whether the shape of a triceratops skull meant it could have managed human vowels, whether anyone had ever tried teaching a bird to say the word Cretaceous because birds were dinosaurs, and that would be like a dinosaur saying its own time period. Michael walked beside her and listened and made the appropriate noises and tried to hold on to all of it. The specific pitch of her voice, the way her sneakers hit the pavement, the earnestness with which she was working through the Cretaceous vowel question, because he was aware, in a way that had nothing to do with reason, that something was about to change. That night, after Lily was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table again. He didn't do the math this time. He'd already done it every possible way, and the numbers were what they were. He thought instead about Sophia Sterling's face when he'd asked if it bothered her. "What I need is real," What you need is real. There was something almost lonely in that, something that she'd probably worked very hard to make sound purely pragmatic, and had mostly succeeded except for the fraction of a second before the answer came out. He'd caught it anyway. That small, careful arrangement of a person holding something back. He pulled the document out of his jacket and set it on the table and looked at it for a long time. Then he called the number on the front page. Diane Marsh answered. "Tell Ms. Sterling I'll sign," he said, "but I need one addition to the contract. Nothing about the arrangement, about Lily. I need it in writing that she's never made uncomfortable, never put in a position where she has to pretend or perform or lie to her classmates about what her home situation is. She's 6. She's been through enough." There was a pause, then, "I'll relay the message." 15 minutes later, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Agreed. I'll have the addendum drafted tonight. SS." He read it twice. Then he set the phone down and looked at the kitchen. The small table, the 2 chairs, the crayon drawing of a dinosaur Lily had taped to the refrigerator 2 weeks ago and labeled, in her wobbling first-grade printing, Tris Tops, Lily's. The peeling linoleum. The ghost smell of the landlord's cleaning solution that never quite covered the damp. He thought, this is the last night in this kitchen. He wasn't sure, sitting there, whether that was a relief or a grief or both at once. It was something he couldn't quite sort into a category. He was too tired for categories. He just sat with it until the feeling passed enough that he could go to bed. The moving was embarrassing, not because of what they owned, he'd never been precious about that, but because of the arithmetic of it. 2 hours. It took 2 hours to pack everything they had into a rented van, and an hour of that was taken up by Lily's books and her collection of small plastic dinosaurs, and the elaborate cardboard diorama she'd made of a Cretaceous period wetland for a school project. The actual furniture, the clothes, the kitchen things, 45 minutes. He didn't let himself think about what that meant. You start thinking about what 45 minutes of packing means about your life, and you end up somewhere that isn't useful. Lily, by contrast, handled it the way 6-year-olds handle most things, with a total absence of the dread that would come later when she was old enough to know that transitions should be scary. She sat on a box and read her dinosaur encyclopedia while Michael wrapped dishes and told him, periodically, facts he hadn't asked for. "Daddy, did you know that a T-Rex had a bite force of 12,000 pounds? "I didn't know that." "It's in here, 12,000. That's more than a crocodile. That's a lot of pounds. Also, they might have had feathers, some of them. Not like fluffy feathers, more like—" She made a gesture with her hand that apparently represented the specific kind of proto-feathers some theropods may have had. "Got it," he said. "Where are we going to live, Daddy?" He paused with a mug in his hand. He'd told her some version of the truth, that a friend had offered them a place to stay for a while, that it would be an adventure, that she'd have her own room. The word friend had felt strange in his mouth, but he hadn't found a better one. "In a very nice building," he said. "Midtown. You'll be able to see a lot of the city from the window." "Will there be a park?" "There are parks everywhere in this city. I want a park with pigeons. We can probably find pigeons." "Okay," she said, and went back to her book, apparently satisfied. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a residential tower on 57th Street, and Michael's first coherent thought upon stepping out of the elevator was that the square footage was probably greater than his old apartment building's entire second floor. It was not, he had to be honest with himself, what he'd imagined. He'd imagined something cold and showroom perfect, all white surfaces and architectural furniture that existed purely to demonstrate wealth. The penthouse wasn't that. It was elegant without being aggressive about it. Books everywhere, the same way as her office. Real ones, used ones, some of them visibly worn. Art on the walls that he didn't know enough to evaluate, but that felt chosen, not installed. Wide windows, yes, more sky than he'd seen from an interior space in years. And it was quiet. A particular kind of quiet that expensive buildings have. The sound-insulated quiet of a place that has been specifically constructed not to let the world in. Sophia Sterling was in the main room when they arrived. She was at a desk near the window and she looked up from whatever she was reading and nodded. "Mr. Carter," she said. "Michael," he said. We're married. Probably easier. Something in her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Michael. And then Lily appeared from behind him. She'd been trailing, dragging her dinosaur encyclopedia and surveying the elevator lobby with the scrutiny of a small person conducting a thorough inspection. And she stopped in the doorway and looked at Sophia Sterling in her wheelchair, and Michael felt the specific parental anxiety of a moment you cannot control, the split second before a child says something that might land wrong. Lily said, "Is that an electric one or a manual one?" Sophia Sterling blinked. "Manual. I push it myself." "My grandma has an electric one. She said the electric one is nicer because you don't have to use your arms as much. But I think the manual one looks cooler because you can go fast if you want." "You can," Sophia said, carefully, like she was parsing something. "You can go quite fast." "I'm Lily. I like dinosaurs. Do you like dinosaurs?" A pause. "I don't know very much about them." Lily's expression made clear that this was both surprising and correctable. "I can teach you," she said. "I know a lot. My dad says I know too much, but I don't think that's actually possible." Michael watched Sophia Sterling's face during this, the way you watch a patch of ice to see whether it'll hold weight. It held. More than that, something happened there, something small and quick, like the flicker of a candle in a draft, there and then controlled. "Your room is down the hall on the left," Sophia said. "There's a bookshelf that was empty. You can put your things on it." Lily was already gone, the encyclopedia tucked under her arm, heading down the hall to investigate her room the way she investigated everything, completely. Michael stood in the doorway of the main room and looked at Sophia Sterling. "She's been through a lot," he said. "She doesn't look like it. She doesn't act like it, but she has." "I know," Sophia said. She didn't say it with pity. She said it the way she said most things, as information, acknowledged. "So if she's ever," he searched for the right way to put it, "a lot, or asks things she shouldn't, or gets into spaces she's not supposed to be, she's not a disruption," Sophia said. "She lives here. This is her home for the year." He nodded. He looked around at the room, the books, the art, the wide, cold sky in the windows. "Thank you," he said. Sophia picked up her reading again. "The kitchen is stocked. Diane can help you if you need anything for the school schedule or transportation. We should plan an evening this week where you and I are seen in public together. Dinner, something credible. Diane will coordinate." "Okay," he said. "Your room is on the east side. The bathroom has a separate entrance." "Okay. Good night, Michael." He was being dismissed, clearly, efficiently, without rudeness. He recognized it for what it was, not hostility, just the practice management of a person who is accustomed to clear endings to interactions. "Good night, Sophia," he said. He went to find Lily and see about dinner. The first week was a particular kind of strained. They were strangers living in proximity, which is a specific type of friction that people don't talk about enough. Not conflict exactly, but the accumulation of small navigations. Whose turn is the kitchen in the morning? Whether the hallway light should be left on or off. The timing of meals. The volume of Lily's narration at 7 a.m., which was considerable, and which filled the penthouse like weather. Sophia worked from home most mornings and went into the office in the afternoons. She had a driver, Marcus, who was the quietest human being Michael had ever encountered. Michael had ridden with him twice to run errands, and they had not exchanged more than 12 words, which he found comfortable rather than cold. The dinners in public were businesslike. Sophia had chosen the restaurants with the same methodology she applied to everything else. Visibility, the right clientele, the kind of places that got mentioned in the columns that existed purely to document where New York's professional class was seen eating. She wore her hair down for these, which was different from how she wore it in the apartment, and she talked in the careful way of a person maintaining a performance, and Michael did his best to hold up his end. They touched hands twice, once on the table, a gesture she'd suggested, quick and perfunctory, and once when he pushed her wheelchair up a slight incline outside a restaurant on Park Avenue, which she had not asked for and which he did without thinking because the incline was there and he was standing right there, and it just made physical sense. She hadn't said anything about it. He wasn't sure if that was approval or indifference. What changed things, or began to change them, was the reading. He found out about it on a Thursday night, past 10, when he got up to get a glass of water and the light was still on in the main room. He came down the hall quietly and stopped in the doorway, and Sophia Sterling was sitting in the middle of the room with a book open in her lap, and sitting on the floor beside her, back against the bookshelf, was Lily, in her pajamas, also holding a book, apparently having been there for some time based on how thoroughly asleep she was not. Lily looked up when she heard him. "We were reading," she said, as if that explained why she was out of bed at 10:15. "I see that." "Sophia has Jurassic Park," Lily said, with the reverence of someone who has just discovered an artifact of great historical significance. "She does?" "The actual real one, with the dinosaurs in it." She looked at Sophia. "But she hasn't read it yet." "I was getting to it," Sophia said, dry. "I told her about the errors," Lily said, "the scientific ones, like the raptors. Because real raptors were actually not that big. They were more like medium-sized dogs, but with feathers and claws. The movie made them much bigger because bigger is scarier." "That's a reasonable editorial decision," Michael said. "I guess, but it's not accurate." He leaned against the doorframe and looked at the two of them. His daughter on the floor in dinosaur pajamas, this woman he'd married for legal purposes sitting in a pool of lamplight with a novel she hadn't read yet. "Come on, Lil, bed." Lily got up with the protestless compliance of a child who knows she's pushing her luck, said goodnight to Sophia with the easy familiarity of someone who had apparently decided, unilaterally, that they were friends now, and padded down the hall. Michael looked at Sophia. "Sorry," he said. "She doesn't always stay put." "She came in to ask about the title," Sophia said. "On the Spine. She saw it from the doorway. I told her she could look at it. And then stayed for 2 hours. She asked good questions." He wasn't sure what to do with that. He said goodnight and went back to his room, and he lay in the dark of the east bedroom and thought about the particular picture of his daughter sitting on someone else's floor at 10 p.m., comfortable and curious, because a woman she'd known for a week had answered her question about a book title. It made him feel something he wasn't sure had a name, something between grateful and worried, something between relief and a vague foreboding he couldn't quite locate a source for. He pushed it away and went to sleep. 3 weeks in, he made the mistake of trying to fix something. The kitchen drawer, the second one from the left, the one with the utensils, had a runner that was coming off its track, and every time you opened it, it caught and stuttered, and you had to pull it at a slight angle to get it fully open. He'd noticed it on day 3. It offended his professional sense in a low-grade way, and one afternoon when Sophia was in the office and Lily was at school, he took the drawer out and retooled the runner and reset it and tested it until it opened clean. When Sophia came home that evening, she opened the drawer to get a spoon for her coffee, and she stopped. She opened it again, closed it, opened it. "Did you fix this?" she said. "The runner was off," he said. "It wasn't a big deal." She turned to look at him across the kitchen island, and he could not read her expression. It was doing several things at once, none of which he had the vocabulary for. "You should have asked first," she said. "It was a drawer runner." "It's my kitchen." He set down his coffee mug. "I'm not disputing that. I noticed something that wasn't working and I fixed it. That's what I do, professionally. I wasn't making a statement." "I didn't say you were." "You kind of implied it." The silence lasted a few seconds longer than was comfortable. "I'm not used to people changing things," she said finally. "In this space." "I understand that." He picked up his mug again. "For what it's worth, I'll ask, next time." She looked at him. "It opens better," she said. "It does." "Thank you." The word came out slightly more carefully than it needed to, like she'd had to find it in a drawer of her own that she didn't open very often. "Don't mention it," he said. That night he heard her laugh for the first time. Real laugh, not the polished social version she produced at restaurants. It came from Lily's room, where Lily was apparently in the middle of an extended lecture on whether the Spinosaurus was actually aquatic or just semi-aquatic, and why the distinction mattered. And Sophia had wandered in at some point, and the lecture had apparently reached the part where Lily used her hands to demonstrate the specific way a Spinosaurus's nostrils were positioned and Michael heard the laugh from the hallway, unguarded and sudden, like it had come out before she could stop it. He didn't go in. He just stood in the hallway for a moment and heard it, and then went to make dinner. The dinner that mattered was 5 weeks in. It wasn't a public one, just the three of them, which had started happening without anyone deciding it would. Lily had stated, on week 3, that she didn't see why they couldn't eat at the table together since they all had to eat at the same time anyway, and her logic was so unassailable that neither adult had found a reason to argue with it. Sophia was quieter at the table than she was elsewhere, not withdrawn, just listening. Lily did most of the talking. Michael cooked because he was a functional cook and because it was something he could do without feeling like he was performing anything. That night it was pasta. Simple, nothing ambitious. And Lily had set the table with the same intensity she applied to dinosaur research. And halfway through the meal, Lily looked up from her food and said, "Sophia, does your back hurt from the chair? Because I read that it can." Sophia set her fork down. Michael opened his mouth. "Lily, it's okay," Sophia said. She looked at Lily. "Sometimes," she said. "Yes." "Where?" "Between my shoulder blades, mostly. From propelling." Lily thought about this with the gravity of a small person absorbing genuinely important information. "My dad knows how to do the massage thing for my back when it hurts. He learned it from YouTube. He's good at it." She looked at Michael with the confidence of someone making a helpful suggestion. "You should tell him when it hurts." Michael focused very carefully on his pasta. "I'll keep that in mind," Sophia said. He felt her glance at him across the table, so brief, calibrating, looking for something, maybe checking if the suggestion embarrassed him. He looked up and met her eyes and held them for a second before they both looked away. "Lily," he said, "eat your food." "I am eating it," Lily said, as she clearly was. "I'm just also talking. I can do both." "I know you can." "Sophia, do you like pasta?" "I do." "Do you like it better than pizza?" "That's a difficult question." Lily appeared to agree that it was. She spent the rest of dinner working through the pasta versus pizza question with the methodical attention she gave to all important problems, and Sophia answered each sub-question with what Michael was increasingly beginning to recognize as her version of warmth. Specific, dry, delivered straight, the kind that doesn't announce itself. He washed the dishes after. Lily went to read. He stood at the sink and rinsed the pot and thought about nothing in particular, or tried to, and Sophia brought her coffee cup over and set it next to the drying rack without being asked, because there was nowhere else for it to go, and for a moment they were just two people standing in a kitchen. "She's a remarkable kid," Sophia said. "I know," he said. "You're doing something right, somehow." He turned off the water. He dried his hands on the dish towel. He looked out the window at the city dark and bright all at once. "She lost her mom at 5, he said. "She doesn't know what she's carrying. She just keeps going. Kids are either flattened or they keep going, and she keeps going." He paused. "I watch her do it, and I honestly don't know where it comes from." Sophia was quiet beside him. "Maybe from watching you," she said. He didn't answer that. He wasn't sure what the answer was, or whether there was one. He said goodnight, and he went down the hall, and behind him the kitchen light clicked off. Outside, the city didn't sleep. It made its sounds, distant and vast and indifferent, the way cities are indifferent, which is not actually cold but just very large. The penthouse held its own quiet against it. In the east bedroom, Michael Carter lay on his back in the dark and thought about fixed drawer runners and pasta dinners and the specific quality of a laugh heard through a wall that belongs to someone who doesn't laugh very often. He wasn't falling for her. He was clear about that. He knew what the contract said and he understood the terms, and he was not a stupid man. He just thought, lying there, that Sophia Sterling was more than the version of herself that she'd brought to the negotiating table, and that somewhere behind the careful arrangements and the managed distances, there was someone who was trying very hard not to need anything she hadn't planned for. He understood that impulse. He'd lived it for years. He didn't let himself think past that. He just noted it, the way you note the weather, and closed his eyes. Down the hall, somewhere between the books and the lamplight, his daughter slept with her triceratops. The apartment was quiet. For now, just for now. It felt against all logic, like something that might hold. 6 weeks in, Michael learned that Sophia Sterling woke up at 5:15 every morning. He knew this because he was a light sleeper. Had been since Lily was an infant, that specific parental rewiring that never fully reverses. And the sounds of the penthouse at that hour were sparse enough that individual movements registered. The soft roll of wheels on hardwood, the almost imperceptible sound of a door. Then, for a while, nothing. And then, if he lay still enough, the distant sound of water running in the kitchen, and the smell of coffee working its way down the hall. He didn't get up to investigate. That would have been strange, and they were both working hard in those early weeks to avoid strangeness. But he noted it, the pattern of it, the reliability. 5:15, every morning. The building asleep around her and Sophia Sterling already at her desk or by the window, doing whatever it was she did in those hours before the day officially started. He found out what it was, accidentally, on a Tuesday. He'd gotten up early himself. Lily had a 6:45 bus on Tuesdays, and the morning logistics required more lead time than he usually gave himself. And he came down the hall, half asleep, intending to start coffee, and stopped in the doorway of the main room because Sophia was there, at the window, and she wasn't working. She was just sitting, looking out at the city in the early gray light, still in whatever she slept in, a loose shirt, dark, her hair unbound, and in her lap, open but face down the way you leave a book when you step away and intend to come back, was something he couldn't see the title of. She heard him and turned. Neither of them said anything for a moment. He was aware in that moment that he was seeing something she didn't ordinarily show people, and she was aware that he knew it, and the whole thing balanced on a single second of mutual exposure before she reached down and turned the book right side up, and the moment dissolved back into the ordinary. "Sorry," he said. "Early bus." "Coffee's made," she said. He went to the kitchen. He poured 2 cups without thinking about it, and brought one back and set it on the table beside her within reach. And she didn't say thank you, and he didn't wait for it. He just took his own cup and went back down the hall to wake Lily. Later, dropping Lily at the school gate, watching his daughter disappear into the building with her backpack and her dinosaur encyclopedia and the particular purposeful stride of a child with places to be, he thought about Sophia's face in the early light. Not the controlled version. The public one, the CEO one, the one she brought to restaurants and board calls and the careful performance of their dinners out. The other one. The one that sat by a window at 5 in the morning with an unread page in her lap. He thought, she's lonely. It wasn't a revolutionary observation. She had told him, essentially, as much, in the clinical language of the initial meeting, isolated, personally and socially. But there's a difference between a fact stated in a conference room and the same fact seen in someone's face in the gray light before the city woke up. One is information, the other is a person. He didn't know what to do with it, so he went to work, and he didn't do anything with it at all. Victor Sterling arrived in their lives on a Wednesday afternoon. Not in person. Not yet. He arrived as a phone call, which Sophia took in her office with the door closed, and which Michael would not have known about except that Lily was doing homework at the kitchen table and had a clear sight line down the hall and reported, with the clinical detachment of an accidental surveillance operative, that Sophia had been on the phone for 45 minutes, and her voice had gotten very quiet toward the end, which Lily said was the sign of someone being really angry because her teacher did the same thing. Michael filed that away. He didn't ask. He asked later, after Lily was in bed, when he found Sophia in the kitchen making tea with the particular controlled economy of movement that meant she was working something out internally and using the tea as scaffolding. "Who was on the phone this afternoon?" he said. She didn't look up from the kettle. "My brother. What did he want?" "To remind me that he's filed a motion with the board's legal committee, requesting a formal review of my," she paused, selecting the word carefully, "personal stability, as it relates to my fitness as CEO. On what grounds? Officially? Corporate governance concerns. Historical pattern of what he's calling erratic executive behavior." She poured the hot water. "Unofficially, he has a source. Someone inside the company who's been tracking my schedule, my social patterns, my public appearances. He's suggesting that this," she gestured vaguely at the space around them, meaning all of it, is a fabrication, that the marriage isn't credible. He's moving faster than you expected. She turned to look at him then. Yes. How much faster? The original timeline I'd planned on was 8 months. He's filing in 6 weeks. He pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. He thought through the math of it. 6 weeks, what they had on paper, what they had in practice, what a board committee doing due diligence would look for. What does he have? Michael said. Specifically, he has calendar records, evidence that we haven't appeared together as often as a credible couple would. He has a statement from someone, I don't know who yet, claiming that you and I do not behave like a married couple in private. That's circumstantial. It is, but corporate boards aren't courts. They don't require proof. They require narratives, and his narrative is cleaner than mine right now. She sat with her tea, both hands around the mug, and looked at the table. What do you need from me? He said. She looked up. More visibility, she said. More public record. Not just the dinners, events, functions, the kind of things that get photographed and documented. A profile in the press, if possible, about the family. About... She stopped. About us, he said. Yes. He nodded. It wasn't complicated, in theory. In theory, it was exactly what the contract had specified, just accelerated. In practice, it meant a different calibration of something that had already started to feel, in small and accumulating ways, less like a contract and more like an actual life. Okay, he said. There's one other thing. She set the mug down. Victor has a source inside my household staff. I don't know who, which means anything that happens in this apartment is potentially being reported. The kitchen felt different suddenly. The same space, but with a different quality. Like a room where a window has been opened and the temperature has shifted. You think someone here is talking to him, Michael said. I think it's likely. How many people have access to the apartment? Diane? Marcus? A cleaning service. 4 people, rotating, 2 others on the broader household account. She paused. I don't say this to alarm you or Lily. I say it because you should know. He thought about Lily, about her questions and her dinosaur lectures and her absolute unguardedness, which was one of the things he loved most about her, and also, right now, one of the things that made him want to put himself between her and everything. She's not going to understand that she should be careful about what she says, he said. She's 6. I know. I'm not asking her to be careful. I'm telling you, so that you can calibrate what you share with the household staff. He looked at Sophia. She was watching him with that steady, assessing quality she had, reading his face, looking for whatever she needed to see. This is going to get uglier before it gets better, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, she said. I believe so. He was quiet for a moment. Then, Victor, what's he like? Something crossed her face. Too fast to fully read, but old, whatever it was. Old and tired. Smart, she said. Strategic. He plans longer than most people plan. Most people think 3 moves. Victor thinks 12. He genuinely believes the company should be his. Not because he wants money. He has money. Because he thinks he built it as much as I did, and he's not wrong about that entirely. He just also thinks that my being in a wheelchair means I can't run it properly, and he's never said that in those exact words in his life because he's not that careless, but it's what he means. She paused. He's my brother. That part's the hardest. He heard something in that he didn't touch. Some old injury, the kind that's healed crooked. Get some sleep, he said. She looked at him like she wasn't sure what to do with that. You too, she said. The charity gala was Diane's idea, which meant it was probably also Sophia's idea, but filtered through Diane for logistical purposes. It was a Metropolitan Hospital Foundation event, the kind of thing attended by the specific subset of New York that both has money and wants credit for it. And it was exactly the sort of visibility their record needed. Michael rented a suit. Not bought, rented, because he wasn't spending money on something he'd wear once, and because some habits of financial sense are hard to override, even when you're no longer technically drowning. The rental suit fit well enough. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror the evening of the gala and thought, passable. He'd gotten his hair cut. His shoes were the good ones. The black leather pair he'd bought 3 years ago for a job interview and worn maybe 4 times since. He looked like someone who belonged at an event like this approximately 60% of the time, which he figured was adequate. He came out into the main room and Sophia was already there. She was in a dark navy dress, deep blue, fitted at the shoulders, and she'd done something different with her hair, half up. And there was something about the combination of it, the dress, the composed straightness of her posture, the way she held herself in the chair, that stopped him in the doorway for a fraction of a second before he managed to move. She looked at him. The tie is off center. I know. I've been fighting it. Come here. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, which was a slightly strange geometry because she was seated and he was standing and fixing someone's tie. From that angle required a slight upward reach on her part, but she did it without comment, her hands quick and sure, a few adjustments. And then she dropped them back and looked at the result. Better, she said. Thank you. Neither of them moved for a moment. He was close enough to be aware of the specific quality of her attention, the focused, present way she occupied space, and she was looking at the now correct tie rather than at him. You look good, he said, because it was true, and because not saying it seemed stranger than saying it. She looked up. Something in her expression was careful, and also slightly at odds with the carefulness, like two systems running against each other. Thank you, she said. Marcus drove them. Lily was with a babysitter, a college student named Cora she'd approved by asking Cora extensive questions about her knowledge of the Cretaceous period, and then apparently deciding that Cora's enthusiasm about learning more was acceptable grounds for trust. In the car, they sat in the back and talked logistics. Who would be there? Who mattered? What Sophia needed from him? Professional, clean, the language of the contract. Outside the window, the city moved past, lit and fast. Victor will have someone there, Sophia said. A source? Someone watching, taking note. He'll want inventory. Then let's give him something to inventory, Michael said. She glanced at him. What does that mean? It means we stop managing the distance, he said. Not the whole night, just enough. The way people actually are when they're comfortable with each other. Because that's the thing that reads when someone's watching, not the big gestures, the small ones. She was quiet for a moment. He could feel her working through it. The risk calculus, what it cost, what it gained. You're right, she said. Okay. He reached over in the dark of the back seat and took her hand. Not dramatically, just put his hand over hers where it rested on the seat between them. She went still for a half second, and then her hand turned slightly under his and settled. Neither of them said anything. Marcus drove. The city went past. The gala was 10 minutes away and getting closer. Boom. The event was loud and warm with the particular warmth of several hundred people and too many chandeliers. They moved through it together, Sophia navigating the room with the ease of someone who had been doing this for years and found it tedious but manageable. Michael a half step behind and to the right, just close enough to be readable. He talked to a hospital administrator for 20 minutes about plumbing. He talked to a venture capital person for 10 minutes about something he didn't fully follow, but he nodded at the right intervals and the man seemed satisfied. He watched Sophia work the room, the way she knew exactly what to say to whom, what to remember, which laugh to produce for which audience. And he understood, watching, that this was a different kind of labor than the labor he did. But it was absolutely labor, and she was good at it, and it cost her something she didn't show. He got her a drink. She didn't ask. He just read the moment, the way you do when you've been watching someone closely enough to know when they need a 2-minute reset. And he brought it back, and she took it and said nothing. But she looked at him with something that was briefly, purely grateful. Around 10 o'clock, a man appeared at Sophia's elbow. He was tall, well-dressed, with a face that was clearly related to Sophia's, same strong bone structure, same dark coloring, but where Sophia's face was controlled, his was easier, charming on the surface of it, the practiced ease of a person who knows how to present well. Sophia, he said, I didn't know you'd be here. Of course you did, Victor, she said. Victor Sterling looked at Michael with the assessment of a person who is very accustomed to evaluating things quickly and filing them. "This must be the husband," he said. "Michael Carter," Michael said and held out his hand. Victor shook it, firm, measuring. "Victor Sterling, Sophia's brother." He smiled, and the smile was warm and did not reach anywhere near his eyes. "She didn't mention she was bringing you tonight. She often doesn't mention things." "We try not to be joined at the hip," Michael said. "She has her calendar. I have mine. We ended up at the same event. That happens." "Indeed it does." Victor looked at Sophia. "You look well." "I am well." "I heard Lily is settling in. 6 years old, is that right? Quite young. It must be an adjustment, having a child in the penthouse." "She's an excellent adjustment," Sophia said. "Children are adaptable." "They are." Victor's gaze went back to Michael, easy and interested and completely predatory underneath. "What is it you do, Michael?" "Building maintenance, primarily. I manage a portfolio of properties downtown." It wasn't exactly false. It wasn't exactly true. Victor's expression did something very small. A flicker of something that was approximately contempt, managed down to a neutral curiosity in about half a second. "Interesting," he said. "How did you two meet? I don't think Sophia ever told me the story." "At an event like this one, actually," Michael said without missing a beat. "About 2 years ago, I was filling in for someone else. She was the most certain-looking person in the room." He glanced at Sophia. "Still is." Sophia looked up at him, and whatever she'd expected him to say, it wasn't that. And for just a moment, she was not performing anything. She was just looking at him. Victor watched this. 2 years, he said, roughly. "And you waited to formalize it until recently." "We're both private people," Michael said. "We weren't in a rush." Victor looked between them. Whatever he was calculating, he was still calculating it. The math hadn't resolved for him, which meant they'd given him something to work with, something he couldn't cleanly dismiss. "Well," he said, and his smile returned, the warm one, the empty one. "Lovely to meet you. I hope you'll both be at the board dinner next month. I think it's important for everyone to spend time together." He looked at Sophia. "Family, especially." "We'll be there," Sophia said. He moved away through the crowd, smooth and unhurried. Michael let out a slow breath. "You did well," Sophia said quietly. "He's good," Michael said. "Yes, he is." She turned her cup in her hands. "You didn't flinch on the 2 years." "Would you have preferred I did?" "No, I'm noting that you didn't." She looked at the crowd where her brother had disappeared into it. "He'll verify. He has people who can pull records, timelines. He'll look for the gaps." "Then we fill the gaps," Michael said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "The thing you said, about being the most certain-looking person in the room. What about it? Did you mean it, or was it just useful?" He thought about that. He thought about the first time he'd walked into her office, and she'd looked at him across the desk with those steady, assessing eyes. The absolute absence of apology in her. "Both," he said honestly. She looked at him for a moment, then she looked back at the room. "Let's stay another hour," she said. "Then we can go home." Home. She'd said it without noticing, or without appearing to notice, just the word, natural in the sentence, home, meaning the penthouse, meaning the place where Lily was already asleep and Cora was probably watching television and the kitchen drawer opened smooth on its fixed runner. He didn't point it out. "An hour," he said. "Okay." They got back at 11:30. Cora reported that Lily had gone to bed at 9 without complaint, which meant she'd actually gone to bed at 9:30 after negotiating for another 20 minutes of reading, but had been model otherwise. Michael paid her, said goodnight, and checked on Lily. Asleep, the Triceratops under one arm, an illustrated dinosaur atlas open on the pillow beside her, which was going to leave a mark on the page but was otherwise fine. He came back out to find Sophia at the window again. The dress was the same. She hadn't changed yet. And she was looking at the city, and she looked tired, which was the first time he'd seen her look tired without her immediately arranging her face back to neutral. "Long night," he said. "Yes." He sat on the couch. He loosened the tie. the correctly centered one, and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Victor's not going to stop," he said. Not a question. "No. What's the worst case? He gets enough board members to call a special vote, forces a leadership review. Even if I win it, it destabilizes the company for months, possibly long enough that 2 of our major development contracts lapse, which costs us," she paused, calculating, "somewhere between 40 and 60 million depending on how the damages get structured." Michael absorbed that number with the practiced equanimity of a man who'd spent the last year operating in a different universe of scale. "And you? And me what?" "The worst case for you, not the company. You." She turned from the window. She looked at him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to figure out whether that was a trap, whether it was genuine, what the right answer was. "I lose the thing I built," she said. 12 years. I built the company from a real estate consulting firm my father left half of to each of us. And I turned my half into something 20 times the size, and Victor turned his half into a grievance. She stopped. "The worst case for me is losing it to someone who never believed I could run it in the first place. Because of the wheelchair. He'll never say so. But that's what it is." She looked at him steadily. "That's what it's always been." He let that sit for a moment without trying to fix it, because it wasn't the kind of thing you fix by saying the right thing. "Then we don't let him win," Michael said. She looked at him. "Just like that." "I didn't say it was simple. I said we don't let him win." She turned back to the window. He watched the back of her, the straight line of her spine, the exhaustion she was carrying, the absolute refusal to let any of it buckle her. "I should have told you earlier about Victor's timeline," she said. "When I first learned it had moved, I chose not to because—" She paused. "I wasn't sure how you'd respond. You thought I'd want out. It's a reasonable calculation. The situation has changed from what you originally agreed to." He thought about Lily in the other room, about the atlas open on the pillow, about the dinosaur in the kitchen drawer that Lily had left there 3 weeks ago as a decoration, and Sophia had moved to the windowsill instead of putting it away. "I agreed to a year," he said. "I'm still in a year." She didn't say anything. She kept looking at the city. "Sophia." He waited until she turned. "I'm still in the year." Something in her face, that closed, careful arrangement, shifted a few degrees. Not fully. She was not a person who let things shift fully, at least not where anyone could see it, but a few degrees. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. He got up and went to bed. Behind him, the penthouse held its quiet, the city pressed against the glass from outside, and the dinosaur on the windowsill stood with its small plastic feet on the sill and looked out at all of it. The week after the gala, Lily had a nightmare. It happened at 2 in the morning. Michael was up and in her doorway in under a minute, the way he always was, his whole nervous system apparently hardwired to her specific distress frequency. She was sitting up in bed, breathing fast, her hair messed and her eyes wide and unfocused the way they get right at the edge of a bad dream, when you're not quite sure you're out of it yet. "Hey," he said. "Hey, I'm here." She grabbed his arm and held on, and he sat on the edge of her bed and pulled her close and let her breathe through it. She didn't tell him what the dream was. She rarely did. She just held on. He didn't know how long they'd been sitting there before he became aware that Sophia was in the doorway. She'd come quietly. She often moved quietly, with a particular kind of self-effacing navigation of spaces, as if she'd made a habit of not wanting to intrude. And she was there in the dim hallway light, watching. Not intrusively, just present. Lily looked up and saw her. "I had a bad dream," Lily said. Her voice was still thick. "I know," Sophia said. "I heard. Did it wake you up?" "I was awake." Lily considered this. "You should sleep more," she said. "My dad says sleep is important." "Your dad is right about a lot of things," Sophia said. Michael looked at her. She was looking at Lily, and there was something in her face that was not managed or calibrated or performing anything at all. It was just open, in the particular way that 2 a.m. opens people, when the guards are all tired. "Can you stay?" Lily said, to Sophia, directly. "Until I fall asleep?" A pause. Something crossed Sophia's face that Michael couldn't fully identify. Surprise, maybe, or some version of it. The uncomplicated request from a child who didn't see why it might be complicated. Yes, Sophia said. Okay. She came into the room. Michael shifted to make space, and Sophia positioned beside the bed, and Lily lay back down, and without any particular ceremony, reached out and put her hand over Sophia's where it rested on the wheel of the chair. Just held it. Sophia went very still. Not tense. Something else. The stillness of someone receiving something they hadn't planned to receive and didn't know yet what to do with it, so they just held it and waited. Michael sat on the other side and watched his daughter fall back asleep, and he watched Sophia sit in the dark beside her, and he thought about what he'd said earlier in the evening. We don't let him win. He meant it. He still meant it. He was also aware, in the 2 a.m. honesty of a room where a child was falling asleep and the city was dark outside and none of them were performing anything, that not letting him win had started, somewhere without his full permission, to mean something more than the contract. He pushed that away. He was good at pushing things away, but it came back, soft and persistent, the way honest things do. The board hearing was set for a Thursday. Diane told them on a Monday morning, appearing in the kitchen doorway with the particular carefully neutral expression of someone delivering information they know is going to land badly. The legal committee had accepted Victor's motion. A formal review panel, 3 board members, 2 outside corporate governance attorneys, and a court-appointed mediator would convene in 72 hours to hear Victor's challenge to Sophia's fitness as CEO. The challenge had 3 components: a claim of psychological instability based on documented social isolation, a claim that the marriage to Michael was a legal fabrication, and a third component that Diane described only as additional evidence, which she said Victor's attorneys had not yet disclosed in full. Sophia listened to all of this with her coffee in her hand and her face doing nothing in particular. "Thank you, Diane," she said. Diane left. Lily was at school. The kitchen was very quiet. Michael looked at Sophia across the island. "Additional evidence," he said. "I heard it." "What do you think it is?" She set her coffee down. "I think it's the source inside the household. Someone who's been in this apartment and has given Victor something specific. Something about how we behave here. How we don't behave." She paused. "Which means what they've reported is accurate. We don't behave like a married couple in private. We behave like 2 people who are carefully not getting in each other's way." He let that sit. 3 days, he said. "Yes." "So what we need to do, she said, is not solvable in 3 days. Not the way Victor's framing it. He's not asking the panel to measure our behavior going forward. He has documented behavior going backward. Weeks of it. Patterns. The source has been reporting for at least a month, which means whatever Victor presents will be a picture of this marriage that does not look like—" She stopped. "That doesn't look real," Michael said. "Yes." He thought about the gala. Victor's face, the smooth warmth of it, the measurement underneath. The way he'd watched them, the way he'd said family especially. He planned the timeline, Michael said. He filed early because he had the source in place first. He was building the case before he told you he was filing. "Yes, I should have seen that sooner." "You saw it. Not soon enough." He watched her. The way her hands were flat on the counter, not fidgeting, but the deliberate stillness of a person using control as a substitute for something else. "Sophia, what happens if he wins the vote?" She looked at him directly. "I step down from the CEO position. Victor assumes operational leadership. I retain a board seat and a minority ownership stake, but the company—" She stopped. "The company becomes his. And you. I become irrelevant." She said it without inflection, which was somehow worse than if she'd said it with any. He looked at her for a long moment. "Tell me everything you need for Thursday," he said. "Every detail. We start now." What followed was 2 days of a different kind of work than either of them was accustomed to. They sat together at her desk, going through Victor's filed documentation. Diane had obtained it through their own legal team, a firm called Whitmore & Associates that had apparently been on standby for this eventuality for some time. The documents were detailed and careful, exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd been planning for 12 moves when everyone else was planning 3. There were calendar records, time-stamped photographs from events, statements from 2 members of the household staff. One was the third person on the cleaning rotation, a woman named Brielle, who Michael had never spoken to beyond good morning, and a 40-page analysis of Sophia's public behavior over the past decade, framing it as evidence of a pattern of emotional dysfunction. Michael read the 40 pages. He read them slowly, and he read them carefully. The way you read something about a person when you're trying to understand what the person writing it actually believes versus what they're strategically choosing to argue. "He thinks it," Michael said when he was done. Sophia looked up from her monitor. "The fitness claim," he said. "He's not just manufacturing it. He genuinely thinks you're not equipped to run the company, not because of your actual performance. The financials don't support that. The growth metrics don't support that. Nothing in the operational record supports that. He thinks it because he's decided that the way you are personally means you'll eventually fail." He set the pages down. He's been waiting for the evidence to catch up to the conclusion he already had. She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. Yes, that's accurate." "It also means he's not going to be satisfied with winning the vote," Michael said. "If the panel sides with him, he won't stop there. He'll keep building." She looked at him. "I know. So Thursday can't just be a defensive play. We can't just refute what he's filed. We have to make the panel understand what he's actually doing and why." "The panel is going to want evidence," she said, "not argument. They won't rule on interpretations of Victor's motivations. They'll rule on the credibility of the marriage and on the documentation of my stability." "Then let's build the credibility," Michael said. "Not perform it. Build it. What's actually true?" She looked at him, a long, careful look. "What's actually true," she said slowly, "is limited. More than you think." He turned his chair to face her fully. "What's true is that we live together. What's true is that my kid loves you and you—" He paused, watching her face. "You don't hate spending time with her. What's true is that you know things about me and I know things about you that you'd only know about a person you were actually living with. The drawer, the coffee, the 5 a.m. window." She went very still. "The 5 a.m. window," he said again, "is not something a person in a fabricated marriage would know about. A fabricated marriage is 2 people performing in public and existing in separate rooms in private. What we have is different from that. And it started different from the beginning." She was not looking away from him. "If I testify," he said, "and I tell them what's actually true, what's actually happened in the last 2 months, that's not fabrication. That's just what happened. Michael, I'm not saying what hasn't happened. I'm not going to sit in front of a panel and tell them we're in love or whatever the—" He stopped. "Whatever the performance of it requires. I'm going to tell them what's real. And what's real is complicated and imperfect, and probably not what either of us would have chosen, and that makes it real. Fabrications are clean. What we have is not clean." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They're going to ask you why you entered the contract. I'll tell them. Everything? The debt, Lily, the eviction, yes. That will make you look. Victor will use it to argue you were coerced, financially leveraged into a fraudulent arrangement. He can try," Michael said. "I'll tell them what coercion looks like and what a decision made under pressure looks like, and I'll let them decide which one they're hearing." She pressed her lips together. She looked at the document on the desk between them, Victor's 40 careful pages. "This could go wrong," she said. "I know. If the panel doesn't believe you, it corroborates his case. I know that too. Why are you willing to do this?" He looked at her straight. "Because it's the truth. And because you've been running this company for 12 years and you built it and you're good at it, and your brother wants to take it because he has decided, based on nothing except his own bias, that a woman in a wheelchair can't sustain something long-term." He paused. "And because Lily would be very upset if she found out later that I had the chance to help and I didn't." Something moved across Sophia's face, some complicated combination of things that she almost let out, and then didn't, and then looked away. "She'd probably make a very detailed argument about it," Sophia said. "She'd use a dinosaur metaphor. She always uses a dinosaur metaphor." It was almost a smile. Not quite, but almost. Quote, the day before the hearing, Victor made a move they hadn't anticipated. He called Sophia directly, not through attorneys, not through Diane, but on her personal cell, which meant he either had the number from before this became adversarial or someone had given it to him recently. Sophia answered because she always answered unknown variables. Michael was in the room when she did, at his own laptop at the other end of the desk, and he watched her face during the call. He couldn't hear Victor's side. He could hear Sophia's. Victor, she said, this is unusual. A pause. I'm listening. A longer pause. Her face stayed neutral, but he saw her hand, the one not holding the phone, press flat against the desk. You're offering to withdraw the motion, she said. Under what conditions? Another pause. No, she said. Pause. No, Victor, that's not... No. Her voice had gone to the quiet register that Lily had correctly identified as real anger. I'm not selling you the Meridian properties. I'm not restructuring the holding agreement, and I'm not... She stopped. What you're describing is not a settlement. It's a surrender, and you know the difference. The call was brief after that. When she ended it, she set the phone on the desk and looked at it. He offered to drop everything, she said, in exchange for restructuring the Meridian portfolio, which would effectively give him controlling interest in the Northeast development projects, and, she paused, for me to agree to a co-CEO arrangement. Him and me, shared leadership, which in practice means he has veto power over every major decision I make. He wants the company without having to win it publicly, Michael said. He wants it without the risk of the hearing going wrong for him. She looked up. Which means he's not as confident as he looks. Or he's impatient and this is faster. Both can be true. She thought for a moment. He's also doing it now, the day before the hearing, which means he wanted me rattled. He wanted me to come into tomorrow uncertain. Are you? She considered the question seriously. About the hearing, she said. No, about... She stopped. He waited. About how much this is going to cost regardless of the outcome, she said. Yes. He understood that. The kind of cost that isn't measured in money or board seats. The cost of having to fight someone who should have been on your side. The cost of every year between then and now that had been building toward this room and this phone call and tomorrow's panel. He didn't say it'll be okay. He didn't say you'll get through it. Those were the things you said when you didn't know what else to say, and they didn't actually help. He said, is there anything you need to do tonight to be ready for tomorrow? She thought, go through the financial performance documentation one more time, the 4-year growth analysis. There are 2 projections Victor's team has misrepresented in their filing, and I want to be precise about the corrections. Do you need me for that part? No? Then I'm going to make dinner. Lily's home at 4. She'll want to tell you something about pterosaurs. She's been workshopping it all week. I've been getting previews. Sophia looked at him, and there it was again. That flicker, that almost thing, the small internal movement that kept happening when she wasn't fully managing it. Pterosaurs aren't technically dinosaurs, she said. I know. She'll explain that distinction herself. It's part of the presentation. He got up and went to the kitchen, and behind him he heard Sophia turn back to her screen, and the apartment resumed its particular version of ordinary, the kind of ordinary that had built itself without either of them planning it. The hearing convened at 10 a.m. in a conference room at the offices of Hartwell Corporate Advisors on 51st Street. The room was large and deliberately neutral. Long table, no windows to the outside. The specific flavor of institutional beige that exists to remind everyone present that they are here for business, not comfort. The panel consisted of 3 board members. Frances Alcott, who was the lead independent director, and ran her end of the table with the unhurried authority of a woman who had been doing this for 30 years. Gerald Park, who Michael had met once at a Sterling Group function and remembered as thorough and humorless, and a man named Roland Devereaux, who was harder to read. The 2 outside attorneys flanked Alcott at the head. The mediator, a woman named Janet Souza, sat at the exact center. Victor was already seated when they arrived. He had 2 attorneys with him and a paralegal, and he was talking to one of the attorneys in a low voice with the ease of a man who feels he is on home ground. When Sophia wheeled in, he looked up and nodded. A small, civil, empty nod. Michael sat beside Sophia. Their attorney, a woman named Clara Finch from Whitmore and Associates, was on her other side. The opening statements took 40 minutes. Victor's attorney laid out the case methodically. The timeline, the documented behaviors, the household staff testimony, the argument that the marriage was financially motivated and contractually manufactured. He was good. He didn't overreach. He stayed close to the documents and let the documents do the heavy work. And the documents were genuinely damaging in parts, Michael had to admit that. The photograph timestamp showing gaps in their public appearances. Brielle's statement, which was precise and detailed, and described an apartment where two people occupied separate spaces with separate routines. Clara Finch responded with the financial record. 12 years of documented company growth, operational excellence, specific decisions Sophia had made that Victor had opposed and which had returned significant value. She was careful and exact and competent. Then Janet Souza looked at Michael. "Mr. Carter, you've agreed to speak to the personal aspects of the marriage." "Yes," Michael said. "I want to be clear about the nature of this proceeding. You're not under oath in a legal court. However, the panel will be evaluating your statement for credibility, and any demonstrable misrepresentation will weigh against the respondent's position. Do you understand that?" "I understand," Souza nodded. "Please tell the panel, in your own words, about the circumstances of your marriage to Sophia Sterling." He looked at the panel. He looked at Victor, who was watching him with that same calibrated assessment from the gala, warm on the surface, cold underneath. He didn't look at Sophia. He would look at her when he needed to, and he'd know when that was. "We met through a mutual professional contact," he said, "about 2 years ago. The circumstances of how we got there aren't simple, and I'm not going to make them simpler than they are, because that's not what you need from me." He paused. "The marriage began with a legal contract. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, because Victor's team has the documentation, and pretending otherwise makes me look like a liar, and I'm not interested in looking like a liar in front of people who are trying to determine what's true." He heard Sophia go very slightly still beside him. "The contract was real," he said, "and the reasons behind it were real, like financial pressure on my end, corporate necessity on hers. I had a 6-year-old daughter, and I was facing eviction. She had a company she'd built and a brother who'd been building a case against her for years. Those facts are both true." Gerald Park leaned forward. "You're admitting the marriage was contractual." "I'm telling you how it started," Michael said. "I'm not done." Park settled back. "What a contract is," Michael said, "is a beginning. You put two people in a space and you give them a year and you see what happens. What happened was not what either of us planned." He thought about how to say the next part, how to say it accurately, without sentimentality, without performance. "Sophia, my wife, is one of the most capable people I've ever been around. She's also one of the loneliest. Not because she's incapable of connection, because she's been in a situation for a very long time where the people around her either want something from her professionally or they underestimate her personally, and she's had to be so far inside her own defenses that she doesn't always know how to come out of them." The room was quiet. "My daughter changed that," he said. "My daughter, who is 6 years old and has no patience for defenses and no understanding of why someone would have them, walked into Sophia's apartment and decided they were friends, and that was that. And I watched my wife." He stopped deliberately on the word, let it sit in the room. "I watched her figure out what to do with that. I watched her sit in the dark beside my daughter's bed at 2 a.m. because Lily had a nightmare and asked her to stay. I watched her move a plastic dinosaur from a kitchen drawer to the windowsill because Lily put it there as a decoration and she didn't want to throw it away. I watched her answer every question Lily asked about dinosaurs and pterosaurs and prehistoric climate with the same focus she gives a board meeting." He paused. "You want to know if the marriage is real. The marriage started as a contract. What it turned into is harder to define, and I think anyone in this room who's been in any kind of relationship for any length of time knows that the hard-to-define thing is usually the real thing. The clean and simple version is usually the fabrication." He looked at Victor then. Victor was watching him, and the calculation was still happening. But something underneath it had shifted. A friction, something that wasn't going quite the way he'd planned. Victor Sterling's argument, Michael said, is that an isolated person with no family and no personal relationships cannot be trusted to sustain a company. I'd argue that tells you more about what Victor thinks is wrong with isolation and personal difficulty than it tells you about my wife's fitness to run anything. She ran a company through 12 years of exactly those conditions, and it grew every year. What she's built, professionally, is the evidence. And what I'm telling you about her personally is also evidence. It's just not the kind that fits in a filing. Frances Alcott looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Carter," she said, "the financial contract between you and Ms. Sterling, are you telling this panel that it no longer reflects the nature of the relationship?" He looked at Sophia then. She was looking back at him, and her face was open in a way that had nothing to do with performance. The 5 a.m. window version of her face, the 2 a.m. in Lily's room version, the woman who had turned a plastic dinosaur from a drawer to a windowsill and hadn't said a word about it. "I'm telling you," Michael said, "that what's on paper is the least important part of what's between us." The room held very still for a moment. Victor's attorney leaned in and said something into Victor's ear. Victor nodded, fractionally, and the warmth in his face had gone entirely. Clara Finch caught Michael's eye from across the table, and he saw something in her expression that was the professional equivalent of "well done," calibrated down to near invisible so the panel wouldn't read it. The panel recessed for 20 minutes. When they came back, Janet Souza's face told him something before she spoke. The particular neutrality of someone delivering a decision they've already settled on. But that was still several minutes away. Right now, in the brief pause before the mediator spoke, Sophia's hand found his under the table. Not dramatically, not for the room. The room wasn't watching at this exact moment. Just her hand over his, the way his had been over hers in the back of a car weeks ago, the way Lily's small hand had closed over hers in the dark. He turned his hand and held it. She didn't let go. Outside, after, the November air was cold and the street was full of the ordinary noise of a city that had kept moving all through the things that had happened indoors. Clara Finch was on the phone 20 feet away, already relaying the result. The panel's rejection of Victor's motion, the finding that the evidence was insufficient to establish either marriage fraud or CEO instability, the formal record that would stand against any future challenge along the same lines. Victor had left without speaking to either of them. His attorney had left a card with Clara, and that was that. Michael stood on the sidewalk and looked at the city and felt the specific tired that comes not from physical exhaustion, but from a long period of held tension finally releasing. Sophia was beside him. "You told them about the contract," she said. "Yes." "You didn't have to do it that way." "I know." Clara would have argued it differently. She had a strategy that kept that part out of it. "I know," he said again, "but that strategy was built on what we are on paper. I thought what we actually are was more compelling." She was quiet. "You said the hardest thing to define is usually the real thing," she said. "I believe that." A cab went past. A woman across the street was arguing with her phone. The city went on being the city, indifferent and relentless and entirely uninterested in the things that had just happened on the 41st floor. "Michael," she said his name carefully, the way she said things when she'd considered them. "What you described in there, what you said we are, is that how you actually see it? Or was it the most effective version of the truth?" He thought about that. He gave it the honesty it deserved, standing on a sidewalk in November. "Both," he said. She looked at him. There was something in her eyes, unguarded, present. The calibration dropped for once without her seeming to be aware it had dropped. "Okay," she said. It was the same word she'd said weeks ago when he'd told her he was still in for the year, but it meant something different now, in this cold air, after everything that had happened inside, after the hand under the table and the honesty in that room and the 12 years of a company she'd built and was going to keep building. It meant something that neither of them had a clean word for yet. He was beginning to think clean words might be overrated. Clara finished her call and walked back toward them with the efficient energy of an attorney who has won something and is already thinking about the next thing. "We should talk about next steps," she said. "Victor's going to regroup. This isn't over." "No," Sophia agreed. "It isn't." But she said it differently than she would have said it 6 weeks ago. Not like a person facing something alone, measuring the distance between herself and a threat. More like a person who has taken stock of what's beside them and found it sufficient. Michael said nothing. He put his hands in his coat pockets and looked up at the building they'd just come out of, all glass and height, and the gray winter sky behind it. The dinosaur was on the windowsill at home. Lily would be home from school in 2 hours with something to tell them about pterosaurs. He thought, home. He let himself think it without pushing it away. Clara Finch had been right about one thing. Victor regrouped. He did it quietly, which was more unsettling than if he'd made noise about it. In the 2 weeks following the panel's decision, there was nothing. No motions, no calls, no visible movement on any front. Just silence, which Michael had learned, watching Sophia navigate the weeks after the hearing, was the version of Victor Sterling that required the most attention. "He's not done," Sophia said one evening, about 10 days after the hearing. She said it the way she said most things she'd already decided, as a statement of fact, not a worry. "I know," Michael said. "He'll come back through the board rather than the legal committee. He's going to spend the next month building consensus, quietly, one board member at a time." "Can he flip enough of them?" Frances Alcott, no. She's principled and she doesn't like Victor's methods. She didn't before this, and the hearing made it worse. Gerald Park is unpredictable. Devereaux. She paused, thinking, Devereaux I'm less sure of than I was. Victor has history with him. They were at Wharton together. "So you work the board too?" "I have been. But there's a version of this where Victor's strategy works and a version where it doesn't, and right now those versions are close to each other in probability." She turned from the window. "Which means the next 6 weeks matter more than the last 2 months. He understood that. He also understood something else, sitting at the kitchen table while Lily's voice came from down the hall. She was explaining something to her stuffed animals, apparently, in the detailed patient tone of a lecturer addressing a slightly difficult audience, which was that the 6-week timeline and the contract timeline were now running almost parallel. The year was ending. He hadn't said it aloud. He wasn't sure she had either, not directly. But it was there. The way the end of things is always there when you're close enough to it. Not loud, just present. The contract had always had a clock on it. The clock was always going to run out. He had known that going in, and he had known it every day since, and it had been easy to hold at a distance when the year was long and the ending was theoretical. It was not theoretical anymore. He did the math the way he'd done a different kind of math in a different kitchen 11 months ago. The divorce papers, the contract's clean dissolution, the respectful parting that the original agreement had promised, the trust for Lily's education, his debts gone, everything the contract had delivered, and Sophia back to running her company alone, and him back to what, exactly? He pushed the question away. He was still good at that. He just wasn't sure anymore whether the thing he was pushing away was the question or the answer he already had. The school play was a Friday evening in December. Lily had been cast as a narrator in what her teacher called an original drama about ecosystems, which Lily had explained at length was actually about the Cretaceous extinction event, and she was the only one who really understood what was scientifically accurate about it and what wasn't, but she was trying to support her classmates' efforts regardless. Michael had known about the play for 3 weeks. He had RSVP'd for 2 seats, which was automatic and unthinking, and which he had then stared at for a moment before submitting. 2 seats. Not one. He hadn't questioned it. He asked Sophia that morning with the offhandedness of someone trying to make a thing seem smaller than it was. "Lily's play is tonight. You don't have to come." But she did ask me to mention it approximately 9 times, so technically the invitation has been delivered. Sophia looked at him over her coffee. "What time?" she said. 6:30. "I have a call at 5. It should be done by 6. "Okay." That was the extent of it. No performance, just a logistics exchange between 2 people who had gotten very good at existing in the same space. They drove to the school together in Marcus's car. Sophia was in a charcoal coat and she'd left her hair down, and she looked, Michael thought, like a person who was making a genuine effort at something and not sure how to wear it. He didn't say that. The school auditorium was full of parents and grandparents and younger siblings who were not interested in sitting still. The chairs were plastic and arranged in two close rows, and the PA system had clearly been installed in a different era and held on by institutional inertia and probably two screws. Michael found two aisle seats near the back. One regular, one with the adjacent chair folded up so Sophia could position without obstruction. And they settled in, and the lights went down with the theatrical ambition of a grade school running a 40-watt dimmer. Lily appeared in the second scene. She had a cardboard sign around her neck that said, "Narrator," and she held a sheet of paper that Michael was 90% sure was not the script she'd been given, but her own revised version. And she delivered her lines with the focused authority of someone who had thought about this very carefully. She was good. Not in the way parents think their kids are good at things when they're really just cute. She was actually good. Clear voice, no hesitation, a specific pacing that made the other kids' lines land better by contrast. She found Michael in the audience in the first 30 seconds, and she found Sophia a half second later, and when she did, something happened to her face. Not a break in professionalism exactly, but a specific brightness, a registering, and then she was back to the script. Michael glanced at Sophia. Sophia was watching Lily with an expression that was fully unguarded. Not the version she brought to board meetings or galas or panel hearings, not even the version she brought to their kitchen dinners. This was something further back than any of those, something she hadn't gotten around to covering up, maybe because the room was dark, maybe because Lily's face had done something to her defenses before she could get them in place. He looked away before she noticed him looking. Afterward, in the corridor outside the auditorium, Lily found them with the velocity of a child who has been performing for an hour and is now running on pure released energy. "Did you see the part with the meteor?" she said to both of them equally without distinction. "Because I added that part. It wasn't in the original script. Mr. Huang said I could, but he was a little nervous about it." "He looked nervous," Sophia said. "He's always a little nervous. But the meteor part was more scientifically accurate. You can't do the Cretaceous extinction without the meteor. That's just..." She made a gesture that communicated the intellectual inadequacy of an extinction narrative without the meteor. "The meteor was very effective," Michael said. Lily appeared satisfied. Then she looked up at Sophia with the straight gaze she reserved for important things. "Did you like it?" she said. Not fishing for compliments, genuinely asking, making sure. Sophia looked at her for a moment. "I liked the narrator most," she said. Lily grinned. The real one, the full one, the one that was still too young to have any management on it. She took Sophia's hand the way she took Michael's hand, as a matter of logistics and affection and no particular ceremony, and they walked out through the school corridor toward the car, and Michael watched the two of them in the hallway light, his daughter and this woman who had agreed to a year of paperwork and ended up, somehow, here, and felt something he had been not feeling for weeks, carefully and with great effort, come loose in his chest. He walked behind them. He let himself have one honest moment with it, standing in a school hallway that smelled of cafeteria and construction paper. Then Lily said, "Sophia, did I tell you pterosaurs had hollow bones?" And the moment dissolved into the practical and the hallway and the night outside the school door. And he was fine. He was completely fine. He just walked faster to catch up. Victor's next move came 12 days before the end of the contract year. It came not through the board, not through the legal committee, but through a journalist, a business reporter at a publication called the Meridian Brief, which was the kind of outlet that operated in the specific territory between legitimate financial journalism and targeted corporate warfare. The article was published on a Wednesday morning, and Diane forwarded it at 6:47 a.m. with a subject line that said only, "Saw this." Michael read it in bed before he got up. It was 3,000 words. It was careful, legally careful, in the way that things written with access to legal counsel tend to be, and it made no direct claims that could be easily litigated. What it did instead was frame a narrative. It used the word alleged with the precision of a scalpel. It raised questions about the circumstances of the Sterling Carter marriage. It noted in a paragraph that Michael read 3 times that sources close to the Sterling Group had described the CEO's personal life as constructed rather than organic, and had raised concerns about whether the corporation's leadership structure was built on solid personal foundations. Constructed. That was the word they'd chosen. He went down the hall. Sophia was at her desk, which meant she'd been up since 5:15 and had probably read it the moment it posted. She was on the phone with Clara Finch, and she was using the quiet voice, which Lily had correctly identified as the real anger register. He made coffee. He waited. When she got off the phone, she looked at him, and he looked at her, and neither of them said the obvious thing, which was, Victor didn't need to win the panel. He only needed to keep the pressure on long enough. How bad is it? Michael said. Professionally? Manageable, probably. Devereaux saw it. He called me at 6:30, which means he was already up and already concerned, which means Victor talked to him before it published. She paused. Personally, the board dinner is in 9 days. If this is circulating at the board dinner, it changes the dynamics of the room. What does Clara say? That we can't sue for defamation because nothing in it is technically false. Constructed as a characterization, not a fact claim. Sources close to the company is unverifiable. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. She says the best response is no response. That engaging with it validates it. Claire is probably right, Michael said. Sophia looked at him. Yes, probably. He sat down across from her. I need to tell you something, he said. She went still. Not about the article, he said. Or not only about the article, but he thought about how to do this. He'd been thinking about it for days, and he hadn't figured out a clean way, so he was going to do it the way he'd done the panel testimony, which was just directly. The contract ends in 12 days. I know. Diane has the dissolution paperwork ready. Clara has the filing queued. I know. He looked at her. I don't want to sign them. The room was very quiet. Not the managed quiet of two people being careful around each other, but a different kind. The silence that happens when something has been said that has been true for a while and is finally out in the air between two people and there is no taking it back. Sophia's face did several things. He watched them happen, and he did not look away, because she was a person who had spent a long time having people look away from the complicated things her face did, and he was not going to be another one. Michael, she said. I'm not saying this to complicate your situation, he said. I'm saying it because not saying it would be a lie of omission, and I told you at the beginning that I wasn't interested in lying to you. The contract expires. If you want to file the dissolution, we file it. I'm not going to... He stopped. I'm not going to make this harder than it already is, but I needed you to know where I actually stand. She was looking at him with the open expression from the panel room, from the school hallway, the version of her face that hadn't been through the management system. The situation with Victor, she started. Forget Victor for a second, he said. Not unkindly. She stopped. Forget the board and the article and the 9 days until the dinner, he said. Just, for this conversation, forget all of it. What do you want? She looked at him for a long time. I don't know how to answer that, she said. Honestly, I don't know when I last asked myself that question without the company attached to it. Then take a minute. It's not a minute question. Take whatever you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere this morning. Something in her face shifted. That slight dropping of degrees, the way it had the night of the gala, when he'd said she was the most certain-looking person in the room, the way it had in the car afterward when she'd said home without noticing. I know you're not, she said. And there was something in it. Not just the fact of the statement, but the specific way she said it, like it was something she'd been noting for months and had finally decided to say aloud. She put her hand on the desk between them, not reaching for him, just there. The gesture of a person who isn't sure what gesture to make but wants to make one. He put his hand over hers. Neither of them said anything for a while. The board dinner was at the Hartwell Club, 9 days later, in a private dining room with a long table that seated 18 and a view of the park that was designed to make everyone present feel they were in the right room. Victor arrived with 2 board allies. Michael didn't know well, and the practiced ease of a man who believes the ground is shifting under someone else's feet. He greeted Sophia with the warmth that never reached his eyes, shook Michael's hand with a fractionally too firm grip, and took his seat at the far end of the table. Francis Alcott was to Sophia's left. Devereaux was 3 seats down, and he was watchful in a way that Michael clocked immediately. The evaluative watchfulness of someone who hasn't decided yet, which was actually better than decided against. The dinner moved the way these things moved: courses and conversation, the formal business of people who conduct relationships through the medium of expensive food. Sophia was precise and composed, working the room across the table the way she'd worked the gala room, but with more at stake and less margin for error. Michael talked to a board member named Harriet Sloan for 40 minutes about affordable housing infrastructure, which turned out to be Harriet's area of genuine passion and not just a dinner party topic, and he knew enough from his maintenance work to engage with it specifically rather than generally. And by the end of it, Harriet was leaning forward and had stopped being polite and was actually interested, and Michael thought that was a real conversation. He liked real conversations. He'd missed them. The article was not brought up directly. Victor brought it up indirectly, in the way Victor did everything indirectly. A reference to recent press coverage of leadership structures, a mild expression of concern about optics in a competitive market, a smoothly worded suggestion that some board members have raised private questions about stability. He was looking at Sophia when he said it. Sophia was looking back at him with the steady clarity of a person who has known someone a very long time and is entirely done being surprised by them. "I think," Frances Alcott said, with the weight of someone who does not speak until she has something worth saying, "that the panel hearing last month addressed those questions definitively. I'd be cautious about relitigating a closed matter." "Of course," Victor said smoothly. "That's not my intention." "Then perhaps we could move to the Q3 development report," Frances said. It wasn't a suggestion. Victor smiled the empty smile. He moved to the Q3 development report. Later, late in the meal, when the formal agenda had dissolved into the more fluid territory of dessert and the second bottle of wine, Devereaux came to stand beside Michael at the window where he'd stepped for a moment of quiet. "You testified at the panel," Devereaux said. He said it without preamble. "I did." "I read the transcript." Michael looked at him. Devereaux was 60-something, with the face of a man who had made a great many calculations in his life and was comfortable with the math. He was looking out at the park, not at Michael. "What you said about what's hard to define being the real thing," Devereaux said. "I thought about that." "What did you think?" "I thought it was either very honest or very well constructed." He paused. "I've been watching the two of you tonight. The way you look at each other when the other one isn't watching." He paused again. "It's honest. I've been in this business long enough to know the difference." Michael said nothing. "Victor is my friend," Devereaux said. "We've been friends for 30 years. That doesn't make him right about everything." He picked up his wine glass. "Sophia built something worth protecting. I don't think Victor sees that. He sees something that should have been his and wasn't." He turned to look at Michael directly. "I'm going to vote with the independent directors at the annual review. I thought you should know." He moved back toward the table. Michael stood at the window for a moment, looking at the park. He thought about telling Sophia immediately. He decided to tell her later, privately, not in the middle of the dinner where the telling of it would change the calibration of the room. He had learned, living with her, that she preferred information delivered cleanly, not in the middle of performing other things. He went back to the table. On the car ride home, Lily was asleep between them. She'd been allowed to come to the dinner as a strategic decision that had also turned out to be genuinely nice, because Lily at a board dinner was exactly what you'd expect, which was a 6-year-old who had 3 conversations about dinosaurs with board members who had never previously thought about dinosaurs and left all 3 of them more engaged than they'd expected. She'd fallen asleep sometime around the drive uptown and was now slumped against Michael's shoulder with the profound unconscious confidence of a child who trusts the surrounding world completely. Sophia was looking out her window. "Devereaux is with us," Michael said quietly. "He told me at the window. He's voting with the independents." He watched her absorb it, the slight change in the set of her shoulders. "That's enough," she said. Low voice, not waking Lily. "With Francis and the independents, that's a blocking position. Victor can't force a vote to the floor." "I know." She looked at Lily, then at him. "It's not over," she said. "No," he said, "but tonight it's close enough." She looked at him. In the dark of the back seat, with Lily warm and heavy against his shoulder and the city moving past outside, she looked at him the way she had at the panel. Nothing managed, nothing calibrated, just the person underneath all of it, looking straight at him. "I've been thinking about what you asked me," she said. "What I want. separate from the company. He waited. I'm not good at this part, she said. I want to be clear that I know I'm not good at it. She stopped. I've been so far inside the parts I'm good at for so long that the other parts have gotten, she looked for the word, rusty. That's not an excuse, it's a disclosure. I know, he said. You deserve someone who isn't rusty at this. I don't know what I deserve, he said honestly. I know what I have, and what I have is better than anything I planned for. She was quiet. I have a daughter who's asleep on my shoulder, and a drawer that opens properly, and someone who rearranged the dinosaur from the drawer to the windowsill instead of throwing it away, he said. The rest of it we can work out. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked out the window again. But she shifted, fractionally, barely perceptibly, toward his side of the seat. He felt it. He didn't say anything. Marcus drove. Lily slept. The city moved past in its indifferent brightness. 3 days after the board dinner, the dissolution paperwork arrived. Diane had it couriered to the penthouse on a Tuesday morning, as she'd been instructed weeks ago when the timeline was set, because Diane was thorough and the instructions had said 12 months, and 12 months was what the calendar said. It was a thin envelope, 3 sheets. Michael's name was on the outside. It sat on the kitchen counter for the entirety of Tuesday. Neither of them mentioned it. Lily walked past it twice without noticing, which was the pure obliviousness of a child for whom a legal envelope on a counter has no register of meaning. Wednesday morning, Michael picked it up. He held it. He thought about the kitchen in his old apartment, the math he'd done over and over on that table, the ghost rectangle of tape on the door. He thought about what he'd said to Sophia and what she'd said back, the rusty parts, the disclosure of it, the honesty of a person who is trying hard at something they're not sure they know how to do. He put the envelope back on the counter. He went to find Sophia. She was at her desk, which was where she always was at 8 in the morning, and she looked up when he came in, and she saw his face, and she set her work down. The paperwork's here, he said. I know. I meant what I said. I'm not signing it. She looked at him for a long moment. That complicates things, she said. Yes. Legally, structurally, the original agreement is a document, he said. Documents describe the beginning of things. They don't have to describe the end. She pressed her lips together. She looked at the desk, then at him. I have a board to manage, she said. A brother who is going to keep coming. A company that takes everything I have most days. I know. I'm not easy to... She stopped. I'm not easy. I know that too. You've been in this apartment for 11 months. You know what I am. I do, he said. You're a person who woke up every morning at 5:15 and sat by the window and you didn't want anyone to see it. You're a person who answered every dinosaur question my kid ever asked her and never once made her feel like too much. You're a person who told me the truth at every turn, even when the truth was uncomfortable. And I think that's more than most people manage. He paused. You're also difficult and controlled, and you don't know what to do with kindness when someone aims it at you. That's all true too. I'm not pretending otherwise. She looked at him. I don't know what I'm doing, she said, quietly, without the management. Neither do I, he said. I haven't known what I was doing since the first night in this apartment. I just kept showing up. She was quiet for a long time. Don't sign it yet, she said. I wasn't going to. She stopped. I need some time to be someone who can do this properly. I don't want to do it badly. Take the time, he said. I'm not in a hurry. She nodded. She looked back at her desk. He could see her trying to get back to the work, the anchor of it, the thing she knew how to hold on to. He turned to go. Michael. He stopped. Thank you, she said. For the panel, for the year, for... She looked around at the room, at the window where the plastic dinosaur stood on its sill, for not throwing anything away. He looked at her. Don't mention it, he said. He went to make breakfast. Down the hall, Lily's alarm was going off. The one she'd set herself, a recording she'd made of herself announcing, "It is time to wake up now." And also, did you know that the largest dinosaur ever discovered was in Argentina? And Michael heard it and smiled without meaning to and went to the kitchen. The envelope sat on the counter, unsigned, unmoving. The city was bright outside. The year was almost gone. What was left of it still had work to do. The envelope stayed on the counter for 11 days. Nobody moved it. It developed a kind of gravitational presence, the way certain objects do when they carry weight beyond their physical mass. Michael walked past it every morning to make coffee. Lily walked past it twice a day without registering it. Sophia walked past it in the evenings, and she never looked at it directly. But her not looking at it was itself a form of attention, the kind you give things you've decided to keep in your peripheral vision. On the 11th day, Lily picked it up. She was looking for a pen. They kept pens in the ceramic jar on the counter, alongside whatever else accumulated there, which currently included a spare key, a rubber band, and a small plastic brachiosaurus she'd placed there 2 weeks ago and forgotten. And she picked up the envelope with the automatic investigation of a child sorting through a pile, looked at Michael's name on the front, and set it back down. "What's that?" she said. Michael was at the stove. He turned down the heat on the eggs. "Paperwork," he said. "What kind?" He considered how to answer that. He had thought on some level that this conversation would not happen, or would happen differently, or would wait until he had figured out how to have it. He had been thinking that for 11 days and had not figured it out, which was its own kind of answer. "The kind that decides what happens next," he said. Lily looked at the envelope again. She was quiet for a moment, which was unusual enough that Michael turned from the stove to look at her properly. "Is it about us moving out?" she said. He set down the spatula. Lily was looking at him with the directness she used when she already suspected the answer and was giving him the chance to be honest about it. She was 6, almost 7 now, her birthday 3 weeks away, and she had the specific emotional intelligence of a child who had been through enough real things that she'd developed an early radar for when adults were managing information. "Come sit down," he said. She sat at the kitchen island. He sat across from her. "The plan, when we moved in here," he said carefully, "was that we'd stay for a year. The year is almost up." Lily looked at him. "But you don't want to leave." It wasn't a question. He looked at his daughter, the small, serious face, the hair that she'd started doing herself in the morning, with results that were enthusiastic rather than accurate, the dinosaur encyclopedia that was never more than 10 feet from her at any given time. "No," he said, "I don't." "Does Sophia want us to leave?" "I don't think so, but that's a question for Sophia." Lily thought about this with the gravity she applied to large problems. "I don't want to leave either," she said. "I like it here. I like our table, and I like the window, and I like that Sophia always answers my questions even when I ask a lot of them." She paused. "My friend Celia has a stepmom, and she says it's hard sometimes. But Sophia doesn't feel hard. She feels like someone who's still figuring it out but is trying." Michael looked at his daughter for a long moment. "When did you get this smart?" he said. "I was always this smart," Lily said. "You just don't always ask me." He pulled her across the island and hugged her, and she let him, briefly and with the tolerance of a nearly 7-year-old who considers herself too old for excessive hugging but makes exceptions. "Don't sign it," she said, into his shoulder. "I know, Lil. I mean it, Daddy." "I know you mean it." She pulled back and looked at him. "Tell her," she said. "You're bad at saying things sometimes, but you should tell her." He thought about every version of himself over the last year. The man who'd sat at a different kitchen table and done impossible math, who'd walked into a glass tower in a jacket with a grease stain and been offered a deal he couldn't refuse, who'd fixed a drawer runner without asking and had dinner every night with a woman who had slowly, grudgingly, imperfectly stopped being a stranger. He thought about all the things he'd pushed away and all the things that had come back anyway, soft and persistent. "I know," he said. He found her that evening in the main room, at the window, which was where she usually ended up when she had something to work through. It was late. Lily was already asleep. And the city was doing its thing outside, all that light and motion and in different scale. He came and stood beside her, not at her desk, just at the window where she was. She didn't turn. "I talked to Lily today," he said. Sophia's hands were in her lap. "I had a feeling she'd weigh in," she said. She told me I'm bad at saying things sometimes. He paused. She's right. Sophia looked out at the city. Her profile was lit from below by the ambient light of the buildings, the specific New York glow that replaced darkness with something else, something that was not quite dark and not quite bright. I spoke with Clara today, she said, about the dissolution. She walked me through what happens legally if we... She stopped. If the paperwork doesn't get filed, what does happen? We remain legally married. The contract's terms have technically expired, which means the financial provisions are settled and complete. But the marriage itself, she paused, continues until one of us actively files. I know, he said. Clara asked me what I wanted to do. What did you tell her? She turned from the window and looked at him. I told her I needed to have a conversation first, she said. He turned to face her fully. The city was behind her and the room was quiet, and the dinosaur stood on its windowsill in the dark with the same patience it had brought to every other thing this apartment had thrown at it. I'm not good at needing things, Sophia said. I want to be honest with you about that because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a version of me that I'm performing. I have been, she looked for the word managed internally for a very long time. And what that means practically is that I know how to run a company, and I know how to win a legal challenge, and I know how to sit in a room full of people who underestimate me and come out better than they expected. What I don't know how to do is be uncertain about someone and let them see it. You're letting me see it right now, he said. She looked at him. Yes, she said. I am. That's new. He looked at her for a long moment. He thought about what Lily had said. She feels like someone who's still figuring it out but is trying. He thought about how children see things that adults work very hard to make invisible, and how sometimes the visibility is the truest thing in the room. I'm not asking you to be different from what you are, he said. I've been here 11 months. I know what you are. I'm asking you if what you are wants to stay in the same space as what I am. She was quiet. That's the question, she said. That's the question. She turned back to the window. He waited. He had gotten good, this year, at waiting. When I was 22, she said, and the accident happened. The one that put me in this chair. I made a decision. I decided that needing people was the most dangerous thing I could do, because needing people means they can leave. And when you're dependent on a wheelchair for basic mobility, the fear of people leaving is very specific, very physical. It sits in you differently than it sits in people who can just get up and follow. She paused. So I built a life where I didn't need anyone. And I told myself that was strength, and it looked like strength from the outside and from the inside for a long time too, until it started looking like something else. Michael didn't speak. He let her have the room she was making. Lily makes it look very easy, Sophia said. There was something in her voice, dry but also not dry, something that was trying to be dry and not entirely succeeding. She just decided to need me, without asking, without any apparent concern that I might not be safe to need. She stopped. I've been thinking about that, about what it costs a person to decide that someone is safe without having proof first. It costs something, he said. Yes, but she did it anyway. She was quiet for a moment. I think I've been learning how to do that this year, watching her do it, and watching you. He looked at her profile, the careful, certain lines of her face, the person who had sat in a conference room and offered him a transaction and had no idea, and neither had he, what the transaction would become. I don't want you to sign the papers, she said. I want to be clear that I know that's not a small thing to say. It means more than logistics. It means I'm saying that what happened this year is something I want to keep. And I'm aware that I don't know very well how to keep things. I'm better at building and defending than I am at, she stopped, at just having something. You kept the dinosaur, he said. She turned to look at him. From the drawer, he said. You put it on the windowsill. You've been keeping it for months. Something happened in her face. A movement, complicated and human and not managed at all. That's a very small thing, she said. It's a very Lily thing, he said. And you kept it. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she laughed. The real one, the unguarded one he'd first heard through a wall, but here now in the room with him, aimed at him, and it was better from the inside. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. He reached over and took her hand where it rested on the arm of her chair. She looked at their hands, and then she looked at him, and this time she didn't look away. Let's see. The envelope went in the recycling on a Thursday morning. Not a ceremony, just Michael picking it up while he was clearing the counter, looking at it for one final moment, and putting it in the recycling bin under the sink while Lily ate cereal and narrated the dietary habits of the Ankylosaurus. And Sophia read the morning financial pages with one hand wrapped around her coffee cup. Lily noticed. She looked at the recycling bin and then at Michael, and he gave her a small nod, and her face did the full-voltage version of the grin she usually kept more controlled. The one she couldn't manage, the one that was just purely glad. She went back to her cereal. The Ankylosaurus, she announced to the room, was basically a living tank. Its tail club could break bone, and it ate plants. Which I think says something interesting about not judging what something is capable of based on what it eats. Sophia lowered the financial pages and looked at Lily over the top of them. "Is that a metaphor?" she said. "Maybe," Lily said serenely. Michael poured himself coffee and sat down at the table that had become their table. In the kitchen that had become their kitchen, in the apartment that had started as a transaction and become the truest thing in his life by the kind of slow, imperfect accumulation that nobody plans for. He thought about all the things that no one tells you about the year you don't see coming. The year that arrives as an eviction notice and a phone call from a woman in a wheelchair who needs a husband for 12 months and will change what you mean by the word home. Nobody tells you that those years exist. You have to walk into them not knowing, which is the only way they work. He looked at Sophia over his coffee. She was back to the financial pages, her hair unbound the way she wore it in the mornings now. She'd stopped putting it up until she had to leave the apartment, one of the small private things that had been happening without announcement. She felt him looking and glanced up. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. She held his gaze for a moment and then looked back at her pages, and the corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The thing she did that was better than a smile because it wasn't performed. Victor's final move came 2 weeks later, and it came not as a board challenge or a leaked article or a legal filing. It came as a phone call from Victor himself to Michael's cell, which meant Victor had obtained the number through means Michael preferred not to think about, and which happened on a Sunday morning while Lily was at a birthday party for her classmate, and Sophia was on an overseas call with a development partner in Singapore. "Mr. Carter." Victor's voice was exactly the same as it had been every time. Warm, smooth, the affability of a man who has decided warmth is a useful instrument. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Michael said. "But go ahead." A brief pause. Victor recalibrating. "I'll be direct. I've been reflecting on the situation. I believe we both want what's best for the company and for my sister." "Do we?" "I'm prepared to withdraw any remaining challenges," Victor said. "Fully. No further motions, no press inquiries, no board maneuvering. Clean slate." Michael looked at the window where the small dinosaur stood on its sill in the December light. "In exchange for what?" he said. "A conversation. Between you and me. About the long term. Specifically," Victor paused, "about your position in Sophia's life, whether it's sustainable, whether what you're building is genuinely what you think it is, or whether it's a man who was in desperate circumstances making a decision that made sense in those circumstances and now can't find the door." Michael was quiet for a moment. "That's a very careful way of saying what you actually mean," he said. "What do I actually mean?" "You mean you think I'm staying for the money, or for the stability, or because leaving is harder than staying once you're already in it. You mean you think I'm not actually what I said I was at the panel, and if you can get me to admit that privately, you have something you can use." He paused. "How am I doing?" A silence, longer than Victor's usual pauses. "You're perceptive," Victor said. Finally, a sentence that rang real. "I've been watching you work for a year," Michael said. "You get more obvious up close." He looked out the window. "Victor, I'm going to tell you something and you can do whatever you want with it. I didn't plan to fall for your sister. I didn't plan any of this. I planned a transaction that would keep my daughter off the street, and I got something else entirely. I got a year of watching a remarkable person be underestimated by everyone around her, including sometimes herself. And I got a kid who decided Sophia was safe to love without asking for proof first. And both of those things changed me. So to answer your question, yes, it's sustainable. Yes, it's what I think it is. And the door, he paused. I already tried the door. I didn't sign the papers, so. The silence stretched. She's not easy, Victor said. And it was the first thing he'd said in this whole conversation across the entire year of maneuvering that had any actual feeling in it. Tired, old feeling. The feeling of a man speaking about a person he had spent decades not understanding. I know she's not easy, Michael said. I'm not interested in easy. I had a whole life of trying to keep things manageable, and it didn't make anything better. It just made everything smaller. Victor was quiet. I built something with her too, Victor said. The company, the early years. He stopped. She doesn't see it that way. I think she does, Michael said. I think that's actually the problem. She sees it exactly that way, and it makes what you're doing hurt more, not less. Another silence. This one felt different. The silence of a person encountering a version of the truth they hadn't held from this angle before. Tell her, Victor started. Stopped. Tell her yourself, Michael said. He ended the call. He stood at the window for a moment, looking at the city that was always there, that had been there through all of it. The dinosaur stood on its sill. He picked it up, the small plastic figure, indestructible and patient, and held it for a moment, and thought about Lily putting it in the kitchen drawer as a decoration, and Sophia moving it to the windowsill without saying a word, and all the small, unchoreographed decisions that had accumulated into something neither of them had been trying to build, but had built anyway. That was the thing nobody told you about the year you don't see coming. The thing that was actually worth knowing, the thing that Michael Carter, who had sat in a different kitchen with impossible numbers and a sleeping daughter down the hall, had carried through an entire year without knowing he was carrying it. The best things you have are almost never the things you plan for. The planned things are the scaffolding. They hold the shape while you're not looking. What you end up with, if you're paying attention, if you keep showing up, if you're willing to fix the drawer even when nobody asked you to, is something that grew in the space between the structure and the actual living of it. He put the dinosaur back on the sill. Sophia came out of the call with Singapore at noon, and she looked across the room at Michael, who was making lunch, and something in his face told her a thing had happened. What? She said. Victor called me. She went very still. On your cell? Yes. What did he offered to drop everything. All of it, clean slate. She wheeled slowly into the kitchen. In exchange for what? He wanted to see if I'd tell him privately what I told the panel publicly. He was testing whether what I said in that room was real. She looked at him. What did you say? I told him it was real. He paused. I also told him to call you himself if he had something to say to you. He's your brother. Whatever it is between you two. I can't fix it, and you probably can't fix it either, but it should at least be said directly. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. He won't call, she said. Maybe not, Michael said. But maybe someday. He set the bread knife down. People change, slowly, badly, with a lot of resistance. But sometimes they do. She looked at him. He could see her turning it over. The possibility. The old injury of it. The specific calculus of a person deciding how much hope is safe to have about something. He said he built something too, Michael said. The early company. He said it like a man who has been holding something down for a long time. Sophia was very still. I know he did, she said quietly. I've always known that. Knowing it didn't change what he was doing, but I know it. He nodded. He didn't push further. Some things needed to sit before they went anywhere. Lunch, he said. She looked at him, the small shift, the degrees, and then she moved to the counter and sat on the other side of it, where she always sat, and watched him make sandwiches. Michael, she said. Yeah. Thank you for the call, for what you said to him. Don't mention it. I'm mentioning it. He looked up. She was watching him with the steady clarity that he had come to understand was her specific version of warmth. Direct, certain, undramatic. The warmth of a person who means what they say precisely because they don't say things they don't mean. You're welcome, he said, awed. Lily's birthday was a Sunday in December, 3 weeks before Christmas, and she wanted a dinosaur cake and 7 people at the party and to be allowed to give a presentation about the Mesozoic era to everyone present. Michael made the cake. It was not a professional product. The frosting was uneven, and the chocolate brachiosaurus he'd tried to sculpt out of modeling chocolate looked, as Lily helpfully noted, more like a very melted horse. But it had candles, and it was made in their kitchen, and Lily looked at it with the fond tolerance of someone who appreciates effort over execution. 7 people meant Lily's 2 best friends from school, a girl named Amara and a boy named Dev, both of whom arrived with the chaotic energy of children who had been promised cake, plus Amara's mother, Frances Alcott, who had become, improbably, something like a genuine friend to Sophia over the months since the panel, an older woman from the 3rd floor named Mrs. Kowalski, whom Lily had befriended in the elevator, and Clara Finch, who had received the invitation with what she described to Sophia as professionally appropriate bewilderment and shown up anyway with a gift wrapped in paper covered in dinosaur prints. The presentation happened. Lily had prepared slides, actual slides, on the laptop, which she had asked Michael to help her make, and which were 13 pages long with images she'd sourced herself and captions that corrected several popular misconceptions. She stood beside the laptop with a ruler as a pointer and delivered it with the authority of a senior academic, and her audience of 7 gave it the attention it deserved. Frances Alcott asked 2 genuine questions. Clara Finch asked 1. Dev asked if any dinosaur could fit inside the elevator, and Lily's response to this was both precise and diplomatic. Sophia sat across the room and watched all of it. Michael watched her watching it. He watched her watch Lily field questions about the Cretaceous with complete command, watched her watch Amara and Dev chase each other around the living room furniture while the adults talked, watched her look at the room full of small, imperfect noise and life, the uneven cake, the slightly too loud birthday song that nobody sang in the same key, the ribbons from presents on the floor, the general chaos of a party that was not elegant and not planned to precision and was exactly what it was. And what was in her face was something he could identify now, after a year. He'd learned her face. He knew what it did when she was running a calculation, and what it did when she was managing something down, and what it did when she was genuinely, unexpectedly moved by something and hadn't gotten to the managing of it yet. This was the last one. She looked up and found him watching her, and she didn't look away. This, her face said, not in words. In the particular way a person looks at you when they have found something they did not expect to find and have decided, carefully and with full knowledge of the cost, to keep it. He nodded, very slightly. She looked back at the room. Lily blew out her candles. 7 of them, which took 2 breaths, which Lily declared was technically still 1 birthday wish divided across 2 exhalations and was therefore still valid. What did you wish for? Amara asked. You're not supposed to say, Lily said, but I'll give a hint. I wished for something that already started happening. Michael cut the cake. The melted horse Brachiosaurus got the first slice, which Lily considered appropriate and possibly symbolic. After the guests had gone and Lily was in her room surrounded by new books and a set of articulated dinosaur figures that Frances Alcott had chosen with suspicious accuracy, and the kitchen was mostly cleaned, and the apartment had settled back into the quiet it kept for itself at the end of days, Michael found Sophia at the window. He came and stood beside her. They stood for a while without talking, the way 2 people stand together when they no longer need the talking to fill the space, when the space itself has become something that belongs to both of them. She wished for us, Michael said. I know. She'll tell us tomorrow. She can't keep things to herself for more than 12 hours. I know that too, Sophia said, and the corner of her mouth moved. Outside, the city was doing what cities do at night in December. The specific brightness of it, the cold air making the lights sharper, everything slightly more vivid at the edges. From this high up, the street sounds were distant, abstracted, just the shape of the city, ongoing. "I want to say something," Sophia said. He waited. "I have been the kind of person," she said carefully, "who measures everything before committing to it. I have been that person for a long time because being that person kept me safe and kept the company viable and kept the things I built from being taken from me, and that is not going to change entirely. I am still that person. I don't know how to be fully someone else at 30 years old, and I don't think you'd want me to be." "I wouldn't," he said. "But," she paused, "this year I built something without measuring it first. I didn't plan it, and I didn't control it, and it happened in the space between all the things I was managing, and I looked up one day and it was there, and it was real, and it was the most real thing in the apartment." She looked at him. "I'm not good at saying things like this." "You're saying them," he said. "I'm trying." She held his gaze. "I don't want the transactional version of us. I know that's how it started. I know that's what's on paper. I want to try the version where there is no paper, where it's just—" She gestured at the room, at the apartment, at all of it. "This." He looked at her. This woman who had sat across a conference table and offered him a deal, and had turned out to be so much more complicated and human and difficult and worth knowing than the deal had described. This person who woke up at 5:15 and sat with the city and had answered every dinosaur question and moved a plastic figure from a drawer to a windowsill and sat in the dark beside his daughter's bed and testified before a panel with her hands flat on a table and said no to her brother and yes to the uncertainty she couldn't fully control. "It's already this," he said. She looked at him. "It's been this for a while," he said. "We were the last to know." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. Not quite. The thing adjacent to a laugh when the feeling is a little too close to the surface for the laugh to come out clean. He reached over and took her hand. She held it. Not tentatively, not like a thing she was trying, like a thing she'd decided. They stood at the window. The city was out there, all its scale and indifference and endless ongoing life, and the apartment held its quiet around them. The birthday ribbon still on the floor, the uneven cake with its 3 remaining slices, the sound of Lily in her room narrating something to her new dinosaur figures with the patient authority of a child who has never doubted that the world is full of things worth explaining. The plastic brachiosaurus stood on its sill in the window light, patient, indestructible. There is a thing that happens to people, not to all of them, not in every life, and certainly not on any schedule, where the thing they needed and the thing they chose become the same thing. It doesn't arrive the way you expect. It doesn't announce itself. It builds in the small, unremarkable moments. A drawer runner, a cup of coffee set within reach, a hand over yours in the back of a car, a child who decides you are safe to love without waiting for evidence, a woman at a window at 5 in the morning that you were never supposed to see. You do not plan for it. You cannot plan for it. The planning is always for something else. The survival, the transaction, the year that has a clock on it. And the real thing happens in the margins of the plan, in the space between what you agreed to and what you actually did. Michael Carter had walked into a glass tower with a grease stain on his cuff, and $11,000 of impossible debt, and a 6-year-old daughter who could explain the Cretaceous extinction event to a room full of adults. He had agreed to a transaction. He had fixed a drawer. He had made dinner and told the truth in a conference room and refused to sign a document, and stood at a window in December with a woman who was learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to have something without measuring it first. It was not a clean story. It had not been clean at any point. Clean is what you tell yourself you want before you find out what you actually want, which is something real enough to be complicated and present enough to be difficult and true enough that it costs you something to keep it. He was keeping it. So was she. Down the hall, Lily put down her dinosaur figures and picked up a book, because she was almost 7, and the day had been long and good and full, and the apartment was quiet in the way that good apartments are quiet. Not empty, not waiting, but resting. Complete. The city went on outside the window. The family inside it stayed.